Okay, everybody, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, glad you are here. This is our presentation about multi-language forms in SharePoint. My name is Will Cooper, and I am a SharePoint solutions developer. I've been focused on providing solutions in SharePoint for the last more than 10 years. And I do a lot of things around SharePoint and the whole Microsoft ecosystem. Outside of my consulting, I also have a YouTube channel that's called SharePoint Smart. I hope you'll check that out. Lots of videos about how to do cool things in SharePoint. And then in addition to the work I do with Ultimate Forms and Infowise, I also have a SharePoint toolkit called SharePointDashboards.com. Infowise is our organization that provides Ultimate Forms, and our philosophy is to make it simple and easy, and also about improving. We're all the time adding new features and functions to our tools to help our users build solutions in SharePoint, and we have a lot of fun doing that. And we try to make it fun for our customers as well, to make it something they really enjoy working with. This is a comprehensive toolkit that adds directly into SharePoint. It's completely inside of the SharePoint user interface, and you do not have to be a programmer. This is a no-code type of solution. So especially as it relates to our presentation today, I'm going to show how easy it is to set up these multi-language forms. After our main presentation, which is about half an hour, if you want to stick around, there'll be some additional information about my tools at SharePoint Dashboard, so you're welcome to stay around for that second part later on. Ultimate Forms is available both for Microsoft 365 and also for on-premise SharePoint. Everything I'm showing you today will work regardless of which type of SharePoint environment you're working in. This is generally how I think about SharePoint. It is a great tool set, and there's lots of potential in terms of solutions that can be set up, but some of the things that you want to do aren't there in out-of-the-box SharePoint. And so Ultimate Forms adds all those functions for you. So anything that you might want to do in terms of providing a solution, it's going to make it really easy. So it just allows you through the interface to apply settings and add features to build out your solutions, and it's really intuitive. All right, so let's get to the focus of our presentation, which is multi-language forms. So for many of us in our business, we're working with colleagues and team members, and most often we're all working in the same language. For my part, that's English, of course. But naturally, we have people using SharePoint all around the world. And in some businesses, you have offices, different locations around the world. And so we've got a mix of cultures and users. And of course, many of us are multilingual. But that can vary. And as we consider the situations, we want to make sure that we're doing the best we can to accommodate for users. And especially, we also want to think about opportunities, to create more user engagement and even do public-facing forms. So most of us are working in the context of SharePoint, but with our tool set, you can also create forms that can be publicly accessible to your customers to fill out. And that's especially a situation where you want to accommodate for different languages. So as I mentioned, our employees and our customers, they speak a mix of different languages. And so we want to think of ways to be adaptable and dynamic to accommodate for that. So in SharePoint, you are able in your user profile to set your preferred display language, and as part of Microsoft Platform, it will dynamically adjust all of the standard labels and settings according to what that individual user is set for their preferred displayed language. And what I'm going to show later, it's picking up on that setting, and the form is going to adapt to show the content according to that. By the way, I should mention a couple of things. This will be recorded. It is being recorded. It'll be loaded on YouTube later, so you don't have to scramble to take notes. If you want to rewatch or share with your colleagues, you can do that. If during the presentation you have any questions in Teams webinar, you should go to the Q&A section, and that's where you can enter your questions. Please be patient. It may take some time for us to get to you, but we absolutely will get to you before we end our presentation. So put your questions in there as we're going through the presentation. Okay, so what I especially would urge you to consider are what I would call critical forms. Naturally, in SharePoint, you have various different processes, and in terms of the people who are involved, it's different according to the form. But for most businesses, there are at least 3 or 4 particular forms that are high traffic. You get a lot of requests, you have a larger user base, and that's the more likely scenario where you have to think about different language users and think about ways to accommodate them. In our example today, we're going to be looking at a help request form, and that might be something that I want to make available throughout my whole organization, or even a help request form for my customers that I might want to show on a public website. When you do what I call a public-facing form, that is to say a form you can create in SharePoint and embed or show outside of SharePoint for your customers, you do want to provide a drop-down. So unlike what I demonstrated earlier, it doesn't automatically know the user's preferred language. So you want to present a drop-down option to allow them to do that. I'll demonstrate that in a moment. Of course, we want to make the form change and show according to the user's preferred language. So in this demonstration during my webinar, you're going to see it's switching from English to Spanish. That's just an example that I picked up on because I know some Spanish, but the concept applies for any language. So whether you're thinking about French or German, or even Chinese or Japanese, all of these various languages can be set up and you can accommodate to your users no matter what that may be. The process will be the same. An additional consideration is thinking about email confirmations. A typical thing that you want to do, in my example, I'm doing a help request form. You want to see an email confirmation go out to let them know that you've received the request, and naturally you want to make sure you send that in the correct language. So that's another consideration in additional to the translation of the form itself, and I'll also demonstrate how that can work. So when we think about translations, of course, we need to be careful. We want to make sure that's done well, and ease of use is important because I would expect many of us perceive that this task, the idea of having a form that can handle different languages, it sounds difficult, just on the face of it. We don't see it often, or at least I don't. And so if we're doing it, one concern is, well, how hard is it going to be to set up this translated form? And the most important thing I really want to demonstrate today is that it is easy. So that when you want to provide this translated content, you can go through the form and do that quickly, and it's not difficult to go through that. All right, so here we are in SharePoint, and we're going to walk through some concepts real quick. So I'm going to show you my interface both from a user who is with English, which is my regular account, and I'll show you logged in as another user who's Spanish speaking, and we'll see how that's different. So as I mentioned, in SharePoint, when you go to your user profile page, there's an area under settings and privacy where the user has the ability to set their display language. So they can come through here, there's a drop down, and of course we see many options. Okay, so once they've set that, SharePoint's going to adapt automatically. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to my other user, and they have Spanish set as their preferred language, and you can tell their interface is going to look different. So Microsoft is automatically translating field labels according to that preferred user language to accommodate for that user. So that's automatically handled on the Microsoft side. So just a key concept to pick up on. In terms of your form itself, that's where we're going to get involved. Okay, so what I'll show is, when I go in as my English-speaking user, this is my default form. This is the form I started with, and then we'll look at how it changes for translated. So this is just basically a plain vanilla help request form, and obviously have all of the contents in English, and pretty straightforward. They'd fill that out and submit. What we want to see here is in the same list as my Spanish-speaking user, they're going into the same exact form, but we can see that all of the content, including the button labels, descriptions, and instructions, are all in their expected language. It's all translated into Spanish. So in the form itself, it's detecting the preferred user language and using the translations from our form controls to accommodate for that. Now there's two kinds of scenarios that I want you to think about. One is thinking about accommodating for your employees. So that's thinking about your standard form inside of SharePoint, and obviously you can accommodate for that functionality. So that's going to be picked up automatically. Another scenario that I want you to consider is a form that you would create and put on a public website. And on your public website, that's especially a situation you want to be accommodating for customers, because we can't just dictate that there's only one language. We want to accommodate for a wide variety of people, and make them feel welcome and respond to us. So you do have the ability to create public-facing forms. Here's an example on a public website. This is a job application, but it's all done in SharePoint. And you have the opportunity to do the same thing. You can create forms, embed them on a public website. So this is the same form, and it's shown outside of SharePoint, and this could be a customer help request. Now in this scenario, it's a little different. It's not automatically going to detect the user language, so we want to just go ahead and ask them as the very first question, what's your preferred language? And then if they pick Spanish, what I do here is we just show a link that says in Spanish that you should go here to go to the Spanish form, basically. And I'll show you there's a slight difference. In the public-facing form, we can simply put this extra little piece of text on here. It's a URL parameter. We say and lang as in and language equals, and then es for Spanish, Español. Okay, so just by having this parameter, that's how it's detected for the public-facing form. So easy to set up, and as I mentioned, this can be for all kinds of different languages, but for the public-facing form, that's how we can detect that. At that point, the user can just go through the form to fill out their information and submit it, and everything's going to go through. As I mentioned, once they submit the form, we want to know, and we want to send an email confirmation, and we want that to change according to which language they use. So I don't want to send an English confirmation help request to a user I know who is Spanish as their first language. I would like to send that in Spanish. So we want to detect that, and I'll show a little bit how that works as well. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how this works. So in Ultimate Forms, we have a really great form designer tool. It allows you to set up your form, and I'll describe the process as it would work for creating your form. So naturally, you should begin by filling out let's call it your default language. The language that's most common for your users to fill out. You just go through in your regular process. You can drag your fields out onto the form, and then I can do things like embed what we refer to our fragments, which is just instructions in the form. I've got a rich text editor. I can fill that out. It's very intuitive. I can do custom headings with icons, that type of thing. and then I can just fill out all my fields. So that's kind of your first stage, if you will. You go ahead and get that set up and make sure everything works the way that you would expect for your default user language. And now we get to the part that's interesting about how to accommodate for this multi-language form. So there's a translations feature incorporated into our toolkit, which is really intuitive and fast to work with. So if I go into any component in the form and it has focus, I've got a globe icon, which is my translations functionality. So at first I just have help requests, and now I want to provide for other languages. So for this heading, I actually put for multiple languages. I simply come in here to my drop down, and I can pick my language and put in my text there and add, and it will add to these. So you can see I've already done Spanish, German, and French. Now you can use a translate tool, but you should be very careful and precise when you're doing translations. Generally, what I would recommend when you're thinking about translations is it's ideal for a person who speaks that language as their first language to be providing you the translated content, if that's possible, and hopefully it should be. And what you could do is coordinate with that user, or even have the give them like a Excel workbook or something like that. But that's your best setup. Either you want to be fluent in that language. You don't want to be casual about it. Of course, most of us are familiar, with Google Translate or other web-based translation tools, but we want to be very precise, and it could be easy to make a mistake if we go about those translations in a casual manner. So to be professional and thorough, my recommendation to you is to try to make sure you have a fluent speaker coming through the form to do the translations, to make sure you get it right. Okay, so for each of these controls, I can go in, and it's easy. In this case, the interface looks a little different, but I basically could just come in here and pick my language, and I can add as many as I want, and I will do this for each field. So I basically just walk down through the form, through each element, and I enter my translation for each control. And it's very easy for me to verify. As I'm going through the steps, I can open up the form, I can refresh it, and I can make sure that it's acting the way that I want, that I see the translated content, and there's no, I didn't miss anything, that type of thing. Okay, so basically you can just walk through the fields, and then other considerations are the actual form submit button. So not only can you go through the field labels and the content in the form, you can go to the controls like the buttons, and those also support for the translation feature. So we want to make sure we don't miss anything. You can also do a custom thank you page. So naturally, if you want to have it go to a confirmation, you can do translations of the content for that text as well. All right, so let me come out of the form for a second. Yeah, I don't want to change that. And I do want to mention we are going to upload this template. It will be available for you to try out for free on our website. So you can work from this example and interact with the form I'm showing you later today. We'll provide that in a link to you, and it'll be linked from our video as well. So the email notifications will show you how we have that set up to work. So same type of concept as with the form. I went through first and I had my default language thank you confirmation. It says, hey, we've received your support request. I just enter my information in English, but I'm checking something on that. So it's when an item's added. And in my case, I'm accommodating for 2 languages. So I basically have a field in there for the language, and I just said if it's not Espanol, then then I know it's English, so display that form. And then, of course, I have the inverse of that. If it is Spanish, then I know I want to send the Spanish confirmation to them instead. So this Functionality is going to be a tremendous benefit to you when you think about accommodating your full audience, whether it's employees or users. This translations function is going to help you out. Now, I did some special things for the public-facing form. So as I mentioned, you should, in the public-facing form, if that's your interest, show it on your public website, ask the user their preferred language, and you provide the various options in there. And then I just set up hyperlinks. So what I did here is I said, oh, if they set the language preferred as Spanish, in that case, I want to show this little hyperlink I set up, and that links me over to the form, which has a special URL where it says language equals Spanish. So what I showed you on here, if you notice these URLs are almost identical, it just links them over to that with the Spanish as the URL parameter. So I could have as many different variations on that as I want. So that's pretty much all there is to it in terms of your process for doing a translated form. Now, another thing that can benefit you is having an edit button here. So here's an example. I'm going to show a little bit more about this. So that's English. It just says edit, but you can have that translate as well. That's kind of an extra piece on that. And if we go back over to my Spanish user, you'll see that I don't want it to say edit, instead it's editar. So we can have that aspect be dynamic as well. And also we want to be knowing which language the submission is, because if I have a form like this, I'm receiving submissions in more than one language. I may have a point person who's doing response on that, who's native speaker in that particular language. So I could do a filter view based on the language, and that way we could kind of divvy it out, so to speak. So maybe if I have a help request form, I'm going to have a point person who handles a particular language because they're fluent in that language and they're going to be able to understand those requests, so we can kind of split it out, that type of thing. So let me go to questions and see if you guys have comments about that. So if you haven't already, be sure to go into the Q&A, and you can go ahead and post any questions about the functionality or what you would need to do in order to do your translated form, and I'll try to answer for you. Your quiet audience. And also, of course, you can follow up with us, if you have questions. And so just go to the Q&A in that section if you have questions. I'll continue to give you guys some information while you think about that. But maybe you can describe your situation, and I can give you advice if you wonder how you're going to go about doing your translated form in your SharePoint environment. Okay, so in order to try out the functionality, if you don't use Ultimate Forms yet, it's really easy to try it. We provide a free 30-day trial, which is the entire functionality of our toolkit. You can go to infowisesolutions.com and then just click Try Now for free, and that will do the installation for you. Okay, so if you go there, you go to Install Now, and then you can pick, according to whether you're SharePoint Online or SharePoint On-Premise. And then, as I mentioned later today, you can download this. Another option for you, if you want to have a conversation and ask us some questions, maybe you have a particular project you're trying to do, and you just want to set up a web meeting. The way you can go about doing that is just do request a demo. If you provide us information, we'll get you scheduled, we'll do a web meeting, and we'll talk with you about your project and your environment, and we'll help you out as much as possible. So that's another thing that you can do. And we have lots of information in our webinar section, so if you're interested in examples of different kinds of solutions, you can go through, and we have web templates for all kinds of different things. So we provide, I think there's well more than 100 videos in here you can scan through, and if you have a particular project in mind, like a purchase order system or an applicant tracking system or you want to do approval system, whatever it is you have in mind, we've probably done a presentation very closely related to what you may want to build. Okay. You can keep asking questions if you need about how the translations features work, how you handle for different languages in SharePoint in the Q&A section. And meanwhile, I'm going to move on to some other content, but I will pause if you guys have any questions on that. So in addition to Ultimate Forms, you can do some things to really improve your interface. And one thing, a lot of people want are visual indicators to show things like progress, approvals, things that may be overdue, all kinds of different things. People like to have a visual UI. They don't want just a grid of text and columns. And so that's where SharePoint Dashboards comes into play. This particular toolkit is specific to SharePoint Online and SharePoint On-Premise Subscription Edition. So you would need to have that version of SharePoint for these particular tools. Now, if you never used this toolkit, what I would recommend first, you can come in here and sign up for a free version, which includes 21 free templates. So that'll allow you to get started and just learn how to work with the toolkit, learn what it is you do, that type of thing. And the way it works is you basically just come in here and you can pick some configuration options according to how you want things to look. So I had an edit button, for example, and you just come in here and you can click the copy button. Let me get logged in. All right, so this video will show you kind of a preview of what it looks like in the environment. This one's simple. It just opens the edit form in SharePoint. Once you have everything configured the way that you want, once you have the colors set how you like to see it, you can just click copy template. It'll give you instructions on what to do. Click OK. Then you can come back over into the SharePoint environment and you just come to the column settings format and you can just paste it in and it will just show up right in here. There's quite a lot of options in here. I'm certainly not going to try to go through all this, but you can browse through the categories. So generally they fall into categories like reporting or mapping or dates or things like that. So if you're looking to have the ability to do a nice visual dashboard in SharePoint and you're trying to find ways to make SharePoint look nice or visualize your data in your system, this might be something worth checking out. And if you have any additional questions on that, you can reach me at my email, which I'll give now. So any questions on follow-up, if you want to contact me, my email is willc, W-I-L-L-C, at infowisesolutions.com. I'll be happy to answer any questions or even set up a web meeting with you if you want to pursue that. So that's our main presentation. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording, but I will keep the webinar going so that everybody has a chance to weigh in with any comments or questions.